is a 12-year-old independent, non-partisan public policy think tank.
February in the winters, the Chinese have been exercising in that area. So it is not as if we did not have.
General DS Hooda, sir, is the former Army Commander of Northern Command. He was.
Jai Hind, Namaste, good evening, and a warm welcome to all of you on behalf of CKS, which is Center for Knowledge Sovereignty. So I am happy to welcome all of you to this forum. CKS is a 12-year-old independent, non-partisan public policy think tank that has been spreading awareness about knowledge and data sovereignty, data and cybersecurity and information warfare, and geopolitics at strategic, political and national levels. CKS is led by a decorated veteran, former DGMO and head of the Shekatkar Committee of Defense Studies, Lieutenant General Dr. D.P. Shekatkar as the chairman, and veteran and former DGMO Lieutenant General V.M. Patil as vice chairman, and Mr. Vineet Goenka is the secretary of CKS. CKS has been fortunate to have hosted several dignitaries and luminaries from world of politics, defense, academics, science and technology and corporates on its platform on a wide range of topics. In the month of June-July 2021, CKS had organized a 5-part webinar series, Thus Spake Generals Season 1. It was well attended and received by audiences from across the world. We had distinguished veterans such as Lieutenant General Shankar, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, Lieutenant Syed Ata Hasnain, Vice Admiral Sekhar Sinha, and Air Marshal SS Soman, who incidentally is with us today as one of the audiences, as the speakers during the session 1. CKS is honored and privileged to host from our platform Season 2 series of 5 webinars talk, Thus Spake Generals. The first talk was by veteran AVM Dr. Arjun Subramaniam, and the second talk was by Air Marshal Anil Khosla, former Vice Chief of Air Staff. Today is the third talk of this season, and we are honored and privileged to have veteran Lieutenant General Dipender Singh Hooda sir with us. Thank you, sir, for joining us. I am sure the audience is very eagerly waiting to hear you. Let me just before that quickly introduce the format of today's talk. First, Dr. Deepa Prakash will introduce Lieutenant General Hooda sir. AVM Pranay Sinha, who has conceptualized the talk series, will introduce the subject briefly after that. This will be followed by a special address by our chief guest, Lieutenant General Hooda, whom we all are eager to hear. The vote of thanks will be given by Dr. Nagaratna. The audiences can write their questions in the chat box and address the same to AVM Sinha sir or me. I must specifically mention here that AVM Sinha sir is joining us today from Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, Africa, as he has traveled there this week to attend the last rites of his beloved mother. We extend our heartfelt condolences to you, sir, and your family, and pray for the departed soul. He has put in a lot of effort in planning and organizing this talk series, and I salute his dedication to the cause of national security that he is attending the event today with. This program is live on Facebook page of CKS and other social media channels, as well as the world over. We have a wide audience witnessing this live. With this, I would like to welcome all the viewers once again, and it is over to you, Dr. Deepa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sumitra. Lieutenant General DS Hooda, sir, is the former Army Commander of Northern Command. He was commissioned into the Army on the 15th of December 1976. During his Army career, spanning 40 years, he has served in the most challenging border areas of the country and in United Nations missions in Ethiopia and Eritrea. In his last appointment as the Army Commander of Northern Command, he was responsible for looking after the sensitive borders with Pakistan and China in J&K, including the Siachen Glacier. It was he who meticulously planned and ensured successful execution of the famous Uri surgical strike into Pakistan in September 2016. In recognition for his exemplary military service, the general officer has been awarded the Vishisht Seva Medal twice, the Ati Vishisht Seva Medal, the Uttam Yuddha Seva Medal, and the Pratham Vishisht Seva Medal. He is the co-founder of the Council for Strategic and Defense Research, a think tank based at Delhi, and a senior fellow at the Delhi Policy Group. Now, I request AVM Pranay Sinha VSM retired, moderator of the session, to take the program further. Viewers, AVM Pranay Sinha has a master's degree from IIT Kanpur, and during his 35 years of distinguished career, held various important appointments in the IAF, He retired in September 18 as commandant from the prestigious Software Development Institute, Bengaluru, and then worked for 3 years as advisor to Bharat Electronics Limited. He is an active member of our think tank. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, viewers, and thanks to our pillar of CKS India, Madam Sumitra, CEO of Triangle Global and Director, Rating Infotech, and Dr. Deepa Prakash, a competent ration expert, CSIR scientist of DRDO. Probably it was her innovative type of ration that was carried out by the soldiers during the surgical that was executed under the leadership of today's speaker, General Hooda sir. Before that, a call out to all the, please put your question and very clear in the chat box. One word of my understanding of this border issue, maybe understanding or misunderstanding, whatever you say, border of what you call today LAC or LOC was actually drawn by our colonial masters and the legacy that they left us to remain entangled with our neighbors time to come. Viewers, we know India was the jewel in the crown of Raj. The British Raj was very possessive of India. They needed assurance that no external forces and power ever intrude in the Indian territory. India to remain free playground for their exotic hunting, not on that, also for their great, and they feared the expansionist, ambitious forces resign like Tsarist Russia and Imperial China. So they created buffer zones called frontiers in the expected direction of feared aggression. As per Sir Henry McMahon, a frontier, I quote him, a frontier is a wide tract border land which perhaps due to its ruggedness or other terrain difficulties clearly define the line expressed, whereas a boundary is a very, very defined line, has got verbal description or a series of physical marks on the ground, unquote. Thus, the Britishers created ambiguous, undefined buffer zone frontiers, both the sides of India, western side, the FATA, the federally administered tribal area, and eastern side, NEFA. They also entered in the treaty with their, that time, independent Tibet of Lamas, so as to maintain a big buffer zone between India and China. In 1950s, Zhou Enlai, that time PM of China, wanted then PM Nehru to remove the ambiguity and to redefine the border. He deterred. Nehruji deterred because for him, NAM was much more important. Border issue could wait. Today, when we are ready to negotiate, redefine the LAC, Mr. Xi Jinping is in no mood to relent. He has a different set of priorities. He has unmasked for last 1.5 years PLAs at our LAC. And who else can explain this impasse, how it can be solved? In his word, let us hear ex-army commander of Northern Command, General Hooda sir, giving his way ahead, his opinion on this impasse. Sir, over to you, sir.
So thank you very much. Let me first thank CKS for inviting me to this show. Let me thank Dr. Deepa for a very generous introduction that she gave, and to AVM Pranay for giving the sort of historical context. So we are going to talk about what is the way ahead, considering that we have almost a deadlock and impasse at our LAC with China. But before I come to that, let me just step back a little and talk about how the events have unfolded, and having served in that area, somewhat my understanding of what has happened there, because I think it's important for us to understand also the background before we can actually start looking for solutions as we go forward. So it's very well known, I think, to all of you that what we saw last year in May 2020 were a series of major incursions by the Chinese. Incursions starting from the north in the area of Depsang, Galwan Valley, Hot Spring, Gogra, north bank of Pangong Tso, and a little bit around the area of Demchok. Now, you might say, incursions have happened in the past, and they have. There have been what we call incursions because there are areas where the LAC and its alignment is disputed between India and China. And therefore, when they come across Chinese patrols come into areas that we consider our own, we consider that as an incursion. I think what was immediately apparent as being different from past incursions, one, they were extremely well planned, very large number of soldiers. So it wasn't normal patrols that came in. A very, very large number of additional soldiers were being inducted into Tibet. And I think what was also completely different was the kind of violence that accompanied these incursions. So as I said, we've had patrol clashes in the past and patrols have come in, but by and large, there has been no violence. Both sides have exercised a great deal of restraint. But what we saw this time was, even during the initial incursions, before Galwan happened, we know, for example, in North Bank of Pangong, so there were images of clashes and injuries to troops on both sides. Two issues I think constantly come up, and one is the issue of was it an intelligence failure? So let me give you my sort of understanding of it. See, reports about Chinese exercises, major Chinese exercises in Tibet had been coming since January. It was something that was also reported, in newspapers that Chinese are exercising. But again, this was nothing new. If you actually look at their exercises in 2018, 2019, around the month of January, February in the winters, the Chinese have been exercising in that area. So it is not as if we did not have the information or intelligence. I think what surprised us was we were not able to gauge the intentions. I mean, there was really no trigger for what the Chinese did. You could say that there has been a period of some tension between the two sides, and that has led to so and so thing happening. In this case, there was, in my view, there was no really immediate trigger for this to happen. And that is why it was, to some extent, the Indian military, the diplomats, etc., were surprised at what the Chinese did. In fact, if you recall foreign minister statements, even recently, he says, we are still not sure as to why the Chinese did it. Was it something to do with the creation of Ladakh as a union territory, some statements that were made by leaders regarding Aksai Chin? Was it because there was a growing sort of closeness between India and the US, which worried the Chinese? Was it, as the Chinese said, infrastructure development on the Indian side which triggered this? I think it's difficult to pinpoint and say this is one reason. It's possibly a combination of all these reasons. But I think largely what the Chinese government was trying to do was to sort of coerce India through military pressure to accept, that China is a superior sort of power in Asia, and that we must sort of accept their primary position in the continent. And that obviously is something that was not acceptable to us. But my sense is, whatever be the reason behind it, the larger picture was, here we are, China as a superior power, and it's time that India sort of start accepting our superiority. After the initial incursions, you are aware what happened at Galwan, where we lost 20 soldiers, and the Chinese, of course, in their opacity, have not given out casualties. They've said 4, and obviously likely that there were many more casualties than that. But what was significant was that this was the first deaths along the LAC since 1975. The last armed clash, which led to deaths of soldiers, was in 1975 in Arunachal Pradesh. After that, the border had been completely peaceful. And I think that was also one reason why there was a certain amount of, an element of surprise on the Indian side. After Galwan, there was a series of meetings, you're aware, between the corps commanders. But what we found was that really there was no substantial progress. And therefore, in the end of August, India launched an operation to occupy the Kailash ranges. And again, this is not something that is not known to you. What this did was that it triggered on the Chinese side some introspection. And in my view, it was a direct result of our occupation of Kailash range that led to the Chinese withdrawing from the area of the north bank of Pangong. So, now these names are sort of very familiar to all of you, that they had come up to Finger 4 and then they withdrew and went back to Finger 8. I think the reason for that was our occupation of the Kailash range. And I know there is a view that we should not have vacated the Kailash Range, and I'm willing to take this up in the Q&A session in case somebody wants to know what my views are. Anyway, after the withdrawal from the north bank of Pangong, so there was also disengagement that took place in the area of Gogra, which is near Hot Springs. After that, what we are seeing is that there is a somewhat hardening of positions actually on both sides. If you look at the last Corps Commander meeting, the 13th Corps Commander meeting that took place, the kind of statements that came out from both sides was I would say pretty strong. Both sides blaming each other for not any move forward. So India said, we adopted a very reasonable position, but the Chinese, were not agreeing. The Chinese said it's because of, India that we are not able to move forward on this. There's also been, after that, a sort of a series of events. We are hearing of, some villages being settled in disputed areas. We hear of a new Chinese border law, which states that, we are sort of resolute to defend our borders. Now, all this to me suggests that hoping for an early sort of breakthrough is going to be difficult. I don't see the likelihood of further disengagement from areas like Depsang, Demchok, etc., happening in a hurry. And I'm basing my sort of, I hope I'm wrong. I hope disengagement takes place. But as I said, I don't see a likelihood of it happening in an early time frame. And I'm basing my deduction on two main factors. The first is, when China decided to do what it did in May last year, it was taking a huge geopolitical risk. It was a time of pandemic. They knew there would be all kinds of international criticism of this unilateral military action, that there would be a response from the Indian side. Yet it went ahead and did it. Obviously, they had something at the back of their mind. Nobody undertakes actions like this without a specific political, diplomatic, military objective. And surely that objective was not that we will stop Indian patrolling from going to PP 10, 11, 12, 13, or that we will capture 1 odd kilometer of territory or secure 1 odd kilometer territory across the LAC in some disputed areas. Obviously, that was not the objective. The objective was, as I said earlier, to try and pressurize India. And India has not buckled. We have clearly told them that what actions were taken by China are not acceptable to us. And therefore, there is a need to restore status quo ante. And if China has not been able to achieve its objectives, I think they will be reluctant to just sort of pack their bags and go back and say, okay, here it is, status quo ante is restored. Because I think they will see it as a loss of face. So they are going to hang on there and try and gain some kind of sort of victory out of this. And therefore, that's the first reason why I say I don't see in an early time frame that the Chinese will agree to sort of go back and vacate areas that they had come into. And my second reason for saying that is, as opposed to last year, on both sides, infrastructure development, habitat for additional soldiers, better equipment, better weaponry, better living conditions have come about from both sides. See, last year we did feel that the winters are very harsh, and will troops be able to sustain through that winter? And could that become a reason for at least some pullback of soldiers? It didn't happen last year. Now the conditions, as I said, are significantly better for both the militaries. And so that is, again, there is no pressure sort of on China to feel that they can or they should, or the terrain and weather should become a factor in their going back. So we are seeing a hardening of positions on both sides. I assess from the Chinese viewpoint, they will think that they have not been able to achieve what they came to do, and possibly it's better that we can sort of survive through this difficult area, which makes me believe that an early breakthrough is unlikely. And therefore, if an early breakthrough is unlikely, what is the sort of way ahead? And let me sort of dive a little into theory here. How are we going to sort of either coerce China or deter China from doing anything more in the future. Deter them from feeling that they can use military instrument along an unsettled LAC to try and pressurize India. And I think there are basically two ways, and it could seem opposite to each other. One way is incentivization, and the other way is a threat of a punishment. So what is incentivization, and what do I mean by incentivization? Is that if you agree to maintain status quo, there will be some advantage to you. And what is that advantage? That advantage is a normalization of bilateral relationships between the two sides, the advantage of carrying on with with what is a very, very healthy sort of economic engagement with India, that India in some ways will not sharply position itself as being sort of anti-Chinese. This is the incentive that can be offered. And I think what the Chinese have been saying, and if you look at their statements, is let's have our bilateral relations on an even keel, and let us keep the border issue separate. And let not the border issue, we will try and resolve it, but let it not impact our overall bilateral relations. And I think here, India has made it again very clear, and constantly you will see the foreign minister's statement saying that what has happened on the border is going to impact our bilateral ties. And therefore, unless that issue is resolved, our relationships will not improve. And I think that is a stand that we must continue to take. On the economic front side, I think, although there has been talk of sort of decoupling, my own sense is we need to do more. We need to show a little more to China that this booming trade, which actually has increased in the last 1 year, in some ways cannot continue if you have hostilities and hostile actions along the line of actual control. So this is something I think, and I'm aware that immediate decoupling, etc., is not easy. But ultimately, I think we have to have a plan to show China that in case this is what is going to happen on the border, various aspects of our bilateral relationships, including our economic engagement, are going to get affected. We also need to look at some of our groupings like the Quad, for example, and see what more can be done with it. And the reason I'm talking about the Quad is because, again, as you are aware, China has been fairly sensitive to Quad. It feels that this grouping is anti-China. But if China continues with the kind of behavior that it does, then I think we have no option but to look at how to also bring in a security element to the Quad. And I know, again, this is a slightly controversial issue. And some people say there is no security angle to it. My own personal opinion is I think we need to have some kind of a security approach as far as the Quad nations are concerned. This is something, as I said, one more way of sort of trying to pressurize China along the border. Again, I think we need to display a more aggressive approach. We need to have visual infrastructure building, greater patrolling activity, greater surveillance along the border, build up our roads quickly. We need to start, there are disputed areas along the LAC. We need to start looking at those disputed areas to make sure that the Chinese cannot do anything more in those disputed areas. They are not able to sort of walk in and sit there and, present us with some kind of fait accompli. Now, you might say that a more aggressive approach along the line of actual control could actually lead to some local incidents happening, and which is not good for peace along the LAC. And I accept that a more aggressive approach in some cases lead to localized actions. But unless this kind of sort of, as I said, this kind of threat is there, I don't see how we are going to apply pressure on the PLA to go back to areas prior to May 2020. If we adopt a sort of a very defensive, kind of an approach, there is really no pressure on the PLA to say, look, what we have done is risky, and therefore we need to step back. So again, we could discuss this further in the Q&A. And as I said, I accept there are greater risks to this. Some kind of threat needs to be posed on the PLA to say what you have done has the scope of leading to much more than what has happened in the past. So that's something that we need to look at. We also need to start now reviewing our protocols, reviewing our sort of border arrangements with the PLA. Between 1996 and 2013, we've had a series of agreements on how troops should behave along the borders. For example, when two patrols come face to face, what is the protocol? How should they behave? There have been protocols which limit the number of soldiers that can be deployed close to the LAC. Now, unfortunately, all these agreements and protocols have failed, and failed primarily because the Chinese have decided not to adhere to these protocols. What they did after May 2020 was a complete breakdown of all agreements and protocols. So I think what we need to do now is talk to each other and put some protocols and put some agreements in place, which will also give us confidence that this kind of behavior is not going to get repeated. A couple of other things I think as we go ahead we need to do, and one is, and I'm not meaning it as a criticism, but I think our communication strategy needs to improve. What we are sometimes seeing is sometimes an attempt to underplay the situation. Now, I quite understand. I've served in those areas. I quite understand that in the past there's really no need to hype border incidents because quietly it was better to settle these issues. Unfortunately, what has happened this time is that it is not going to be possible. I mean, from what we are seeing of PLA action, I think sort of very quiet diplomacy unlikely to work. And so therefore, I think we need to be able to communicate our intent very clearly and very strongly to the Chinese. Sometimes I get the impression that we try to sort of underplay the events that are happening along the line of actual control. The second issue with our communication strategy, unfortunately, sometimes we are finding different statements coming out from, say, the diplomats and some of the senior military leaders. And I think this also plays only into the Chinese hands when you have different viewpoints being expressed by both sides. My suggestion is, the military should quietly do its job on the border. As I said, a strong, aggressive intent should be displayed on the border. And as far as communicating India's, position, communicating what we feel, in my view, should be left to the Ministry of External Affairs, so that we are all speaking with one voice as far as our communications are concerned. So as I said, I think there is an area for improvement here. We can't have different and differing viewpoints coming out from people in authority in India. And my final point is, I think we need to make sure that there is no repeat of what has happened last year. As I said, I don't see this situation getting resolved in a hurry. But I think more important for us is what happened last year should not be repeated along the LAC. We should make sure China, is how do I put it? We should make sure that China is reluctant to employ the military instrument to gain political objectives by acting along an unsettled border, an unsettled LAC. We have felt in the military for long that an undefined border, an undefined frontier is a place where China to take advantage of by trying to pressurize India, which is one reason why in all our discussions with the Chinese, forget border agreement. They have not even agreed to define the LAC. We've been telling them that let's at least define the LAC, where your perception and our perception is, and try and reconcile it. They have not done it because I think that they see this as an advantage to them. And therefore, we have to make sure that they do not exploit this. And to do that, we need to now start, thinking about a long-term strategy of how to deal with China. I think it is quite clear now to everyone that China is a strategic competitor, if I may use the most gentle word, and that the competitive strategy between India and China will only sharpen in the future. We will see China attempting to establish its hegemony in Asia. And to do that, it will see India as the only country which can stand up to it. And therefore, we are in, I'm not saying we'll go for some kind of an all-out war or something, but definitely sharper strategic competition. You could see greater aggression along the LAC. As the PLA Navy grows, you will see greater presence of Chinese ships in the Indian Ocean. And so if this is what the future is going to be, what is our long-term strategy to deal with China? What is our long-term political strategy, diplomatic strategy, economic strategy, military strategy? What are the kind of military capabilities that we have to build up to ensure that China cannot coerce, pressurize India by taking actions along the LAC? So these are issues, I think, long-term that we need to look at. So I will end here. And I am quite happy to take sort of questions. I have tried to give you, sort of a broad kind of an overview. But if there are any specific areas, then we could discuss. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. It's going to be a long haul. Talk to each other. Sir, I remember one of the strategy which you had propounded a year back was that we should have 3 C's: capability, communication, and credibility. Today, you stressed more on communication. I think you are happy with the capability build-up. Credibility remains, you question that. And yes, the communication has to be there in one voice, unambiguous. It has to be one authority. I think you also mentioned, sir, the hegemony of China going to be there, and only we can stand up. Time will. Sir, I take 2-3 questions for today evening. First question, sir, it's my outrageous question to you, sir. This is that since we know Aksai Chin is with China already since long, can't we keep this as a bargaining chip and we bargain that, okay, you keep this and let us redefine everything else? Your viewpoint on this.
So Pranay, this is something that was, has been sort of talked about and discussed in the past, that the area of Aksai Chin is with China, and so we give up our claims in that area, and the Chinese give up their claims in the eastern sector, as they call it, because they claim complete Arunachal Pradesh. So these are, I think these are difficult sort of political questions, because while it could practically appear to be a good solution, I don't know whether politically any political leadership will say we are willing to redraw our maps, that we are willing to redraw our lines and our boundaries. So these are difficult questions to answer. As I said, it makes practical sense. What is with us, we keep. What is with them, they keep. I think what we can start, Pranay, is by defining at least the line of actual control. What is the problem today? The problem today is these transgressions are taking place because there are a few pockets where there is a dispute about where exactly the LAC lies. If the LAC is defined by both sides, then there will be no question of transgressions. Everybody knows clearly. Let me give you the example of, say, Finger 4 and Finger 8 in the north bank of Pangong Tso. We say the LAC is at Finger 8. The Chinese say the LAC is at Finger 4. If we can, and then you constantly have clashes when their patrols come, our patrols go. If we can at least reconcile the LAC, that the LAC actually, okay, both sides agree, passes through a particular area, then there is no question of transgression, there is no question of patrol clashes. The situation along the LAC will also become peaceful. So I think let's start with, if we can, define the LAC. And once we do that, and then maybe move on to a border set.
Thank you, sir. Sir, our regular viewer Mr. Dharmesh Jangraji, he has asked on the credibility issue, how much we are prepared for conventional war with.
So we are prepared for conventional war with China. I mean, I think there is no doubt about that. Our capability that we have been building up, the infrastructure, our deployment along the border. Let me tell you, if you actually compare the Indian deployment versus the deployment of PLA in Tibet along the border, our deployment is much better. Our deployment is much stronger than the PLA side. They have certain advantages. They have certain advantages in that their infrastructure is much better. And that's a matter of geography. See, Tibet is a plateau. So building roads, building railway lines is much easier. For us, we have to go from the valley right up to the Himalayan watershed. So building roads is that much more difficult. So they have an advantage as far as infrastructure is concerned. We have an advantage as far as our Air Force is concerned. And you are aware of that. I mean, they are operating in high-altitude airfields where they can lift off only with limited fuel, limited armament, etc. We are operating from airfields, which are in the plains. So we have an advantage there. We have a geographical advantage in the Indian Ocean. So I would say it's a sort of a mix. They have some advantages. We have some advantages. I think as far as conventional operations are concerned today, we are in a good state. Let me just clearly define that. What will happen 20 years from now, I don't know. Because you see, it's also a reality that the Chinese defense budgets are rising very, very sharply, just as their economy is sort of, growing faster. And therefore, 15, 20 years down the line, what is the capability that they'll be able to build up? Because, frankly, they're looking at matching the United States. They're building a military for that purpose. So unless we also get serious about, and that's why I say take a long-term approach about what capabilities we require, what is the military capability that is essential to combat the PLA in the future. That debate needs to start now. Today, I'm quite sort of confident that if anything happens along the LAC, India will hold its own.
Thank you, sir. We are credible force for that, sir, giving assurance. Another question on future aspects, sir. Mr. Vijay Apte is saying, he's asking, ये प्रयोग था या संयोग? Was it coincidence, sir, or it was adventurism? और कुछ भयंकर होने वाला है? The hegemony is going to increase? His question, sir. Futuristic.
Okay, so what they see what they did, whether you classify it as adventurism, whether you identify it as risk-taking, the point I want to make is it was not done just at the spur of the moment. उन्होंने plan करके किया है. उनके दिमाग में कुछ था कि हमको ये करना है. So it isn't as if some local commander, PLA commander, general ने कहा कि चलो अभी ऐसे करते हैं. So they went and did it. It wasn't that. It was planned at the highest level. As I said, did they achieve their objectives? Probably not. What will happen in the future? I don't think either country is really prepared to go to an all-out war. Both are nuclear powers. Both are strong militaries. So I think what you will see is attempts to pressurize us as they are doing diplomatically. We are hearing of things like string of pearls, etc., etc. How they are encroaching into South Asia, which we consider as to sort of, our strategic space. So you're seeing how they are doing that. Their alliance with Pakistan, we are seeing. As I said, growing military capability as you look into the future. So these are things we have to contend with. Competition leading to certain amount of sort of military activities along the LAC. That I think is something that is likely to grow in the future.
Sir, another question, which is something related to trade and impact. In case if we take POK, sir, this is Mr. Avani Sinha from ex-chief engineer from Bihar government. He's asking, in case if POK we take, what will be the impact on the CPEC corridor?
Just if we take what?
POK, sir. If we attack POK.
Oh, so the CPEC passes through Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and therefore, obviously, if we are going to attack POK, and I take this as a purely hypothetical question, frankly. If we attack POK, it is going to significantly impact on the China-Pakistan economic corridor. The thing is, if we take a decision on POK, we will have to factor this in, because when you're looking at POK, it's not merely Pakistan. You're also looking at significantly hurting Chinese interests. And therefore, will China react? Will it not react? How will it happen? It's something that, we need to consider when we start talking about and taking decisions about what and how to do with POK.
Thank you, sir. I'll take the last question of the evening, sir. And we are eagerly awaiting your viewpoint on did the right thing, sir, giving the Kailash range?
So, it's again not a very simple question to answer, because people have their own sort of viewpoints. And one viewpoint is that by giving Kailash range, we actually gave away our only advantage that we had. And by giving away this advantage, the Chinese are now saying we are not going to withdraw, for example, from Zepsang and from Demchok and from Hot Spring. And therefore, if we had held on to it, possibly we could have negotiated better. The other point, I think practically what we also need to understand is, if we had not vacated Kailash range, the Chinese wouldn't have gone back from Finger 4. I mean, this was a clear quid pro quo, that we are going to go back from the North Bank and then you go back from the South Bank. That was it. If we think the Chinese would have automatically just gone back from Finger 4 without any quid pro quo from our side, I'm sorry, that wouldn't have happened. So perhaps at that time, the understanding was, we are in a tense situation. Let's at least start the disengagement process. And hopefully, this disengagement process will lead to some confidence building and further. To me, I think that was the thought process behind that, that let's at least start some process of disengagement and withdrawal, which could then build confidence and lead to further disengagement. Now, it hasn't happened in all the areas. We did see that it did happen in Godhra, but then after that it is. So as I said, really no clear-cut answers to say this would have been better or this wouldn't have been better. I'm just giving you sort of both viewpoints of, one viewpoint saying we should have held on, the other viewpoint saying if we had held on, then the disengagement process wouldn't have started at all. Nothing would have moved.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for that viewpoint. And in fact, many of our viewers are very, very happy in a way. This adventurism happened because it's giving opportunity to India to and build up its credibility, build up its infrastructure. Sir, now I'll ask our legal eagle, Dr. Nagratna, Associate Professor of Law, Chief Coordinator of Advanced Center on Research, Development and Training in Cyber Law, and Forensic at National Law School, Bangalore, to propose vote of. Over to you, madam.
Thank you, sir. Very good evening to one and all. It is again my pleasure to extend a formal vote of thanks during this evening event, Thus Spake Generals, and it's today's talk. I, on behalf of Center for Knowledge Sovereignty and each of the participants of today's event, wholeheartedly thank our esteemed speaker of today's event, Lieutenant General DS Hooda, sir, for delivering this talk on the most interesting, at the same time, issue of great relevance for not just the two countries which were the focus of today's talk, but on an issue of global attention and importance. Way ahead, Indo-China LAC. Sir, we thank you for delivering this extremely informative, as well as at the same time, analytical talk on the topic, covering widely all relevant aspects, including from its historical development till today's issues of concerns, of recent issues of conflicts, possible diplomacy and other strategies, suggestive military strategies, and many more, indicating also on as to how India should plan a collective strategy to address the concerns that have arose on this domain. Thank you so much, sir. I also thank a wonderful organizing team from CPS for organizing this event and making necessary arrangements. I must mention my deep sense of appreciation and thanks to Shri Vinod Goenka sir for initiating this series of talk event and guiding the team throughout. Thank you, sir. Our special and heartfelt gratitude to Shri AVM Sinha sir for planning and organizing this event. So we thank you also for the commitment to the cause of the nation, and especially to CKS and all of its endeavors, especially for being a part of today's event despite your personal issues and challenging time. Thank you so much, sir. Our appreciation and heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed participants of today's event for making the event an extremely important and meaningful one. I'm happy to recognize that in the participants gallery here on Zoom, we've honored members from armed forces, including Shri Marshal SS Soman sir, AVM Kaushik sir, Sinha, from Bihar government, Dharamveer Chandra, and many more. And also the members from academia, particularly those for teaching international laws at various law schools across the country. I'm happy to also note there have been 11,25,000 plus participants attending today's event virtually through various online platforms. Special thanks to my dear friends from CKS also for organizing this event, Mrs. Sumitra Goenka ma'am and Dr. Deepa Prakash for your contribution towards successful conduct of this event. Thanks to each one of you, dear participants and esteemed members amongst the participants for making this event a grand success and a meaningful one. Thank you so much.